You think you have the map of your life completely drawn out. You know the routes, the stops, and exactly where the road ends, usually in a quiet, solitary house. But then, a student offers a simple ride home in the rain, and suddenly, that map you've been clutching for decades dissolves in your hands. What began as a mundane favor spiraled into a moment that shook my foundations, woke up a heart I thought was sleeping, and proved that life is never truly finished with us. Before we unravel the story, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and drop a comment telling us which city you are listening from. It helps us build this community together. Now, let's begin. I hadn't planned on being the last soul on campus that Thursday evening, but academia has a way of stealing time. Between grading a mountain of midterms, answering frantic emails, and a committee meeting that seemed to loop in circles, the hours just vanished. By the time I finally gathered my things, the university was bathed in the deep, inky blues of nightfall. The usual hum of student life had faded into a heavy silence. I pulled my scarf tighter, bracing against the wind. It was late November, and the air had that biting, metallic taste of incoming snow. Walking to the staff parking lot, I clicked my key fob. Nothing. I tried again. Silence. When I climbed into the driver's seat and turned the key, the engine gave a sickly click and died completely. The battery was gone. I slumped back against the seat, gripping the cold steering wheel. I had made a mental note to call the mechanic weeks ago, but life, as it always does, had gotten in the way. "Professor? Do you need a hand?" The voice startled me. I looked through the open window to see a young man standing in the dim light. It was Elias, a quiet student from my modern literature seminar. He was holding a stack of library books, standing next to a weathered but sturdy-looking SUV. He had always been a background presence in class, attentive but reserved. "Oh, Elias," I sighed, stepping out. "I'm afraid my car has given up the ghost." I was just about to call for a taxi. "No need for that," he said, his voice calm and steady. "I'm heading toward the North District. I can drop you off. It's on my way." I hesitated. I've spent 60 years building walls of independence and professional distance. My instinct was to politely decline. But looking at the empty, freezing lot and the genuine kindness in his eyes, I faltered. "That is incredibly kind of you," I said. "I don't want to be a burden." "It's not a burden really," he smiled. "Hop in. It's warm inside." We climbed into his vehicle, the smell of old leather and rain filling the cabin. As we pulled onto the main road, the initial awkwardness melted away faster than I expected. He asked about the lecture from earlier that week, not to score points, but because he was genuinely wrestling with the material. I found myself talking not as a professor, but as a person, sharing my frustrations with the administration and the small, hidden victories of teaching. He listened with a gravity that was disarming. He wasn't just hearing me. He was understanding me. The drive was smooth, the streetlights passing by like a rhythmic pulse. Elias drove with a relaxed confidence. Soft jazz played quietly from the dashboard, creating a cocoon against the cold night. I glanced at him sideways. He was young, yes, but there was a weariness, or perhaps a wisdom, in his profile that I hadn't noticed from the lectern. At a long stoplight, he turned his head, his expression turning serious. "Clara," he said. Hearing my first name felt electric, a sudden breach of protocol that felt strangely right. I hope this isn't out of line, but I've wanted to say this for a while. My heart did a small flip. "Go on," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I watch you when you read the poetry passages in class. You don't just read them. It's like you're remembering them. There is so much life in your voice. It's rare to see someone who feels things so deeply. I find it incredibly compelling." I sat frozen, stunned by his honesty. There was no flattery, no game. Just a raw observation from one human to another. A warmth spread through my chest, a feeling of being recognized, not for my title or my tenure, but for the person buried beneath the blazer and the scarf. "Elias," I said, reaching out to touch his arm briefly, a gesture of pure reflex. "Thank you. That means more to me than I can say." He smiled, a genuine, crinkling smile, and the light turned green. We drove the rest of the way in a companionable silence, the kind usually reserved for old friends. When we arrived at my driveway, I felt a strange reluctance to open the door. "Thank you for the rescue," I said, unbuckling. "Thank you for the conversation," he replied, his eyes holding mine. "Good night, Clara." I walked into my home, my heart beating with a rhythm that felt decades younger. The house was quiet, but I didn't feel alone. I felt seen. That short drive had cracked a window in a room I had sealed shut years ago. The next day, Elias was everywhere in my mind. It was unsettling. I was a woman of schedules and syllabi, yet I found myself distracted, replaying the timbre of his voice. When I saw him later that afternoon near the library, a spark of nerve shot through me. "Good afternoon, Professor," he nodded, his tone respectful, but his eyes warm. "Hello, Elias," I replied, fighting a smile. We exchanged a few words about a book he was carrying, and the flow was effortless. Back in my office, I stared at my phone for 10 minutes before I did something reckless. I sent a text. "Thank you again for last night. Your kindness turned a bad evening into a lovely one." His reply came within seconds. "I'm glad. I actually really enjoyed it. I hope your car is back in action." That evening, I paced my living room. Then I took a breath and typed, "If you're free, perhaps we could continue our conversation? There's a coffee shop on 4th Street. Tomorrow?" The vulnerability was terrifying, but his response was immediate. "I'd like that very much. See you at 4. Walking into the coffee shop the next day, I felt a flutter of anticipation I hadn't felt since I was 30. The shop was cozy, smelling of roasted hazelnut. Elias was already seated in a booth. He stood when I approached, a gentlemanly act that made me smile. "Clara," he said softly. We sat, and the hours just evaporated. We talked about literature, yes, but also about regret, family, and the fear of stagnation. He admitted he felt older than his peers, disconnected from the frenetic energy of his generation. I admitted I felt younger than my years, trapped in a role of elder I wasn't ready to fully inhabit. As the afternoon sun dipped low, casting long shadows across our table, Elias leaned forward, his voice lowering. "I know there is a gap between us," he said, addressing the elephant in the room with gentle courage. "I know how it looks. But when I speak to you, I don't feel time. I just feel connection. And that is so hard to find." My pulse hammered in my ears. He was validating everything I was afraid to feel. "I feel it too, Elias," I whispered. "It's unexpected, and it's frightening, but it's there." Leaving the shop, walking out into the crisp evening air, I felt the heavy weight of expectation lift off my shoulders. I realized that the heart doesn't check the calendar. A few nights later, Elias suggested a drive. "There's a ridge just outside of town," he texted. "The view of the stars is unmatched." I said yes. When I slid into his passenger seat that night, the dynamic had shifted. The barrier of professor and student had dissolved into man and woman. We drove up the winding mountain roads until we reached the overlook. Below us, the city was a sprawling galaxy of lights. Above us, the real stars burned cold and bright. We stood at the edge of the overlook, the wind tangling my hair. "It's breathtaking," I breathed. "It is," Elias said. But he wasn't looking at the sky. He was looking at me. He reached out, his hand finding mine in the darkness. His grip was warm, solid, and questioning. I laced my fingers through his, answering him without a word. "I didn't see this coming," he admitted, "but I don't want to run from it." "Neither do I said, my voice trembling. I thought my story was already written. I thought I was just reading the epilogue. But this feels like a new chapter. "Then let's write it," he said softly. We stood there for a long time, the silence filled with the promise of something new. It wasn't about trying to be young again. It was about allowing myself to be happy, here and now, regardless of what the world might say. On the drive back, the car was filled with a peaceful energy. I realized life had handed me a surprise, wrapped in a dead battery and a rainy Thursday. When he dropped me off, He held my hand for a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you for being brave," he said. "Thank you for seeing me," I replied. I walked into my house and sat by the window, watching his taillights disappear down the street. A profound sense of contentment settled over me. The rigid map of my life had been torn up, and for the first time in decades, I was thrilled to be lost. I realized then that age is simply the cover of the book, but the story inside is timeless. It can still surprise you, it can still thrill you, and it can still love. So, to everyone listening, throw away the map. Don't be afraid of the detours, the breakdowns, or the strangers who offer a hand. Sometimes, the most beautiful roads are the ones you never intended to take. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. Until next time, keep your heart open to the unexpected.